I've always really liked Spider-Man 2099. I had a handful of his comics as a kid and just fell in love with the concept. The Amazing Spider-Man is still my favorite version of the wall crawler, but I can never deny just how intriguing I thought the web slinger of the future was. I always just wanted more people to know about this version of the character and what he had to offer.
You can imagine that I was pretty excited to find out that Miguel O'Hara was going to be seeing a depiction in Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and while I enjoyed a lot of aspects of that game, it just wasn't how I imagined bringing the character of Spider-Man 2099 to life. I had another chance coming my way though, as the next game Beenox was developing focused on bringing the Amazing Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099 together once again with a stronger emphasis on story and carrying over the combat from its predecessor.
Was this the adaption of the character I was looking for? Was Miguel O'Hara fully realized, and how well did he interact with Peter Parker's webhead? Spoilers ahead, everyone. It's time to jump on into Spider-Man: Edge of Time.
The story begins with Spider-Man dying.
Alright, show's over, time to go home.
So we already need to talk about a few things. First, the marketing of Spider-Man's death. When all of the articles and trailers started popping up for this game, the death of Spider-Man was always at the forefront. Even when you boot up the game, the main menu dramatically plays it up like it's the point of the entire story, but this actually takes place maybe a third of the way through the game and doesn't have nearly the impact the developers wanted us to believe it does. Secondly, do you even know who this is that's killing him? That's Antivenom, a character that didn't debut in the comics until around the time the game was even released. Long story short, Eddie Brock lost his old symbiote at one point and found out he had cancer. Then he got a new symbiote and bonded with another mutant superpower to heal cells in his body. So now, as Antivenom, he's one of the good guys and can heal any illness and absorb radiation. If he ever went bad, that would be a huge problem for the Spider, since his powers are radiation-based and Antivenom could sort of cure him of his powers just by touching him. Kind of weird that they would choose a villain so new with a backstory that doesn't even get explained in the game itself, but I guess this is what we got. We see Spider-Man 2099 holding the corpse of Peter Parker, and we fade out into where the story really begins. In the year 2099, Miguel O'Hara is working at a super company called Alchemex and is growing increasingly suspicious of another man who works there, Walker Sloan. Sloan has been aggressive in how quickly he's climbed the ladder at Alchemex, and O'Hara doesn't trust him, convinced that he should keep an eye on the old man. After following Sloan and his artificial intelligence hologram around, who seems to be interested in nothing more than getting Sloan to dish out exposition, Spider-Man discovers that, sure enough, Sloan is planning to use a time portal that he's created to travel back into the past and establish Alchemex far before its time, revolutionizing the world of science and dismantling their competition. O'Hara tries to follow, but the portal rejects him as it needs more time before it can transport another living body, but he's able to stay in the portal long enough to see visions of Peter Parker's death, and it seems that he was able to keep his memories as the world is rewritten by Sloan's tampering. New York is transformed in both the past and the future, and yeah, okay. And we see that Peter Parker's time has changed quite dramatically. He's an Alchemex employee now, rather than a photographer for the Daily Bugle, and submits a sample of his DNA to the company's records for identification. In the future, O'Hara is chased out of the Time Research Lab and is able to get a hold of the sample and creates a communication bridge between them. Apparently, this time communication bridge begins at the point in which the sample was taken, or some kind of plot detail that I didn't seem to wrap my head around. Look, whether it makes sense or not, the point is that now O'Hara can communicate with Parker and vice versa. Miguel tells Peter about what Sloan has done, and that the present day he's familiar with now has been altered by the crazed scientist. He informs the classic Spider of the fate that he saw in the portal and tells him that he needs to get to safety to avoid being killed so that the two of them can team up to reverse what Sloan has done. Peter says he'll help, but refuses to retreat, saying that if there's a killer on the loose, he can't very well just let him run wild. The two Spider-Men bicker about this a bit as they try to make it back to the 66th floor and back to the Time Gateway room. Now I can finally praise something about this game. First, the presentation is really well done. There's this fun cinematic feel to the way events are portrayed, and the cutscenes are just as great to look at here as they were in Shattered Dimensions. The game uses some of its set pieces to show the opening credits of the game, and I just love stuff like that. Now, there are a couple of issues with the game's presentation, but I want to get into that a little bit later. Secondly, the voice performances. Josh Keaton reprises his role as Spider-Man after playing him in what is hands down the best animated series about the character, and Christopher Daniel Barnes, who played Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon I grew up watching, plays Miguel O'Hara, and this is fantastic. In the comments of my last video, Jeffrey T pointed out that the voice cast for all the Spider-Men were carried over from old Spider-Man cartoons, which I actually never knew, but it's great to see that this idea was brought back here. This is exactly the way I always imagined Spider-Man 2099 would act and sound. The way he and Parker go back and forth with one another is great too, showing that while they both don the title of Spider-Man, they're still very different people, and it gets even better when they try to joke with one another. O'Hara can't help but get annoyed with Peter though, as the original wall crawler makes his way through Alchemex and discovers that Antivenom is going crazy throughout the facility, leading him to assume that the symbiote is the one responsible for his death. Not wanting him to get away, he chases after Brock, and O'Hara tries to make his way back to his own gateway. Along the way, we see a concept O'Hara calls quantum causality come into play.
What the shock? What happened? The elevator I'm in just changed into a closet.
Huh. Rock just tried to kill me with an elevator. Weird coincidence.
Maybe not.
So the idea is that things that happen in the past affect the layout of Alchemex in the future, which makes sense. The problem is that the circumstances in which quantum causality take place are not all compatible with one another. Okay, so in one situation, O'Hara is bombarded with giant robots who start kicking his tail, so Peter has to break into the robotics development lab and destroy all of the research so the robots disappear in the future. A fun idea, and I'm following everything so far, but in another situation, Peter accidentally destroys a couple of canisters full of toxic gases, and O'Hara, being in the same room in the future, is dying from the gas and needs Peter to replace the canisters. Alright, no. Nearly 100 years have passed. Are you really trying to tell me that in all that time, nobody other than Spider-Man decided that it might be a good idea to swap out the canisters and those toxins have just been spraying all over this room and somehow not escaping into the air ducts of the rest of the building?
I hate to admit it, but this quantum causality thing of yours is actually pretty effective.
Oh, glad you approve.
You know, for something that makes no freaking sense at all.
The game also uses quantum causality for padding, and I do mean a lot of padding. Spider-Man 2099 will just be waltzing into a corridor at some point with his goal in clear sight, but out of nowhere, something happens in the past that we don't even see, and the butterfly effect twists the hallway into a new maze to get through and reach the end. This can get annoying from time to time, and it's a pretty transparent tactic for stretching out a concept that wouldn't normally lead to a very long plot. Speaking of plot, eventually, Peter is able to make it to Antivenom in the Time Gateway room and discovers that the symbiote has been embedded with mind control chips by Sloan with the help of Dr. Octavius. Cranking up the mind control juice, Sloan takes advantage of the rage stored within Antivenom, and now he's a jerk and everyone loves him. Antivenom drains Peter of his powers and, yeah, just straight up kills the guy. O'Hara shows up on the other side of the gateway and pulls Spider-Man's body into his own time. Sloan and Octavius plan to send Antivenom into the future to squash the bugs for good, but the portal needs time to recharge before it can send any more biological material through safely. Miguel takes Spider-Man's body to a cellular regeneration chamber to heal him because I guess he wasn't quite as dead as we thought.
But just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
The gateway starts to turn back on and Antivenom is about to charge through, but Spider-Man 2099 jumps through first and lands in the past. Venom tries to take his powers away, but since O'Hara's powers aren't radiation-based, that trick isn't gonna work this time. Miguel beats the ever-loving tar out of Antivenom and manages to tear the mind control chips out of the big white murder boy, leading to one of my favorite moments in the game.
You controlled me.
I didn't control you, Brock. I freed you. We both know you wanted Spider-Man dead. You should be thanking me.
Let me show you just how grateful I am!
Immediately followed by a moment that just baffles me. So Antivenom attacks Sloan and Octavius, and now Spider-Man games are just ripping off other Spider-Man games. The three men have been converged into one grotesque creature, with Antivenom's symbiote suit, Doc Ock's mechanical arms, and Sloan's blind rage and hatred for Spider-Man. This Spider-Man 2000 retread is appropriately named Atrocity. Peter wakes up from the chamber and tries to get back on his feet. It doesn't take long for the effects of the machine to bring him back to peak capacity, but because of Antivenom's little stunt, the Time Gateway can't transport biological material, but can transport mechanical parts. And here's where the real meat of the game is. Both Spider-Men are trapped in each other's time and need to get past Atrocity's tentacles, collect DNA from Atrocity to figure out what's going on with him and send it back to O'Hara. Peter needs to send parts from the future to the past so Miguel can fix the time machine, and Parker's Spider-Man has to chase her around. Are you kidding me? We are in the future! How is this still happening? Okay, so apparently, Alchemex got hold of the original Black Cat, cloned her, and force feeds her anti-aging pills because reasons. Is this a sign? I feel like the game is trying to tell me that 100 years could pass and Spider-Man games will still find ways to force me to chase Black Cat around all over the place. Alright, you know what? I have another problem to bring up too. So at one point, Peter finds an archive computer and finds out that Mary Jane died in Alchemex during the time Miguel was there. I don't care about how she got there, I don't care about the fact that this only exists to pad out the game length and give us a couple more Spider-Man 2099 skydiving sequences, though I'm not letting those off the hook, I'll get back to them. What really bothers me is how little this game seems to understand Peter Parker as a character. At several points, Peter scolds O'Hara, telling him that his responsibility comes first and that it's the crux of being Spider-Man. Okay, that's fine, and I like it, but it doesn't match up with what happens here. Miguel tries to tell Peter that Mary Jane isn't the priority here and that the entire future is at risk, and
The future depends on
My future is meaningless without her.
Are you kidding me? Okay, if Peter and Miguel succeed in setting the timeline right, Mary Jane won't even be here to be in danger and die in the first place. So that would solve that problem right then and there. What bothers me even more is that this is something that should never come out of Spider-Man's mouth. This is no longer Peter Parker. Of all of the elements you could have taken from Spider-Man 2000, how about leaving a really cool twist on 2 established villains alone and maybe take a cue from this scene?
Being Spider-Man has given me a lot and taken a lot away, but one thing never changes. My responsibility to use my powers for others before myself, no matter what the cost. There are innocent people at Omnitech and they need our help right now. I won't let them down. Then I'll stop Venom.
Some people might disagree with me on this point, but you just wait. I'm not done griping about the way this game portrays Peter Parker. But first, let's stop complaining about the story and start complaining about the gameplay. Okay, so the gameplay of Edge of Time isn't altogether bad, but it feels like a half measure. What I mean is that between the story beats, you play the game alternating between each Spider-Man and beating up thugs, getting keys, and opening doors. Every mission, enter rooms, see a locked door, find the keys, and get through the door. This sums up 90% of the gameplay. And sure, a lot of great games can be described that way, but it shouldn't be a problem if beating up thugs is fun. Where it falls flat though is that the combat of Edge of Time isn't ever able to rise above just being decent. For the most part, you're dealing with the same exact moveset and abilities carrying over for each character from Shattered Dimensions, but they aren't really evolved at all. I even feel like some of the impact is gone. I can't quite describe it. You can still upgrade your combat ability through experience points like before, but it really just leads you to the same thing. This is hurt even further by the game's art style. It works well enough for Spider-Man 2099, as the art style complements his movements and abilities well enough, but one of my favorite parts of Shattered Dimensions was how the art styles were chosen for each individual Spider-Man. And the Amazing Spider-Man was just able to shine more visually in that game. In this art style, more focused on realism, a lot of that flair seems to have been lost, and playing as him just seems less fun than it did before. Again, the gameplay is not bad, I want to stress that, it's just disappointing. What is bad are these skydiving sections. What happened here? They worked so well in the last game, but now the control has been completely shot. I can barely even touch the analog at times, and O'Hara will just go careening off into every obstacle he sees, which gets very annoying very fast. And then there's just look at it. At least the music is good. I actually really like the composition here, and there were times in the game where the music alone got me invested in the moment and made me feel a sense of urgency. And yeah, I'm sure you noticed by now, but unlockable costumes are back. So Sloan and Octavius are trapped in a pasty time void monster, but Alchemex has still been around for a pretty long time, which might make you wonder who the CEO of the whole place has been. Well, Peter finds out and shock.
So this is where you make the big reveal, and I say, holy cow, Norman Osborn, or the Kingpin, Jonah Jameson. Come on, please be Jameson.
All of them long dead, I fear. Too bad they didn't have access to the anti-aging drug we developed. Does wonders for you. And I do mean you.
I don't even have the time to begin explaining why I don't believe for a minute that Peter Parker would ever screw with reality like this and turn evil, but I guess the game doesn't care about explaining it either. CEO Parker makes a comment about how he's been around in the future for so long, orchestrating everything behind the scenes because of the anti-aging drug that the company created, and something about how he lost everyone he ever loved in one day, but the event is never explained to us unless I missed something somewhere. Apparently, CEO Peter wants to harness some kind of quantum storm and use time travel shenanigans to rewrite reality and save all the people he ever loved. I think the only aspect about this I like is the little trophy room CEO Peter has with his old suits and the statues of his enemies that he defeated in Shattered Dimensions. There's something nostalgic and foreboding about it, I just wish it made more sense. Alright, let's wrap this up. Eventually, O'Hara and Parker are able to fix up the gateway and get back to their own times, and after a long stream of shenanigans, Parker fights Atrocity, O'Hara fights evil CEO, who has this crazy spider robot thing going on because I guess anti-aging drugs don't account for superpowers, and with the evildoers with influence over the time stream out of the way, and Peter Parker presumably convinced not to turn evil at some point and mess around with time travel, the world is returned to normal in both times, and Miguel gives Peter a little crash course on quantum theory while the credits roll, which, I'll admit, is an endearing idea.
So, do I recommend Spider-Man Edge of Time?
No. A part of me wishes I could say yes, because honestly, there's a lot here I do like, from a better representation of Miguel O'Hara to a story about time travel that, while hard to explain, is easy enough to follow while playing, and I like the interactions that the two Spider-Men have with each other. But then there's the repetition, then there's the combat feeling watered down, then there's story elements like CEO Peter Parker that I just can't like no matter how much I want to love this game. Honestly, I can see myself sitting down to play this game again at some point in the future. There's still something here for me, and I still like this game, and I know that there are other people that feel the same way, but I can't ignore what the game got wrong, and at the end of the day, it's just a bit too average to be worth hunting down. There are better Spider-Man games out there, with a bit more to offer than Spider-Man: Edge of Time.
I wish this review could have turned out a little differently, but looking at everything objectively and subjectively, that's just how I feel. But times were changing for Spider-Man back in those days, and it was almost time for another movie adaptation to come out. So, in the next episode, I hope you'll join me as we take a look at The Amazing Spider-Man, the game. Thanks again for watching, everyone. See you next mission.
Thank you for playing. Would you like to try again?